Hello, welcome back, everyone. I am Psychic Liz Cross from psychiclizcross.com. You can also follow me on Patreon, patreon.com/remote viewing and beyond. And tonight we are joined once again. We are so lucky because we learned so much from Mary Beth, my friend who does QHHT and the emotion code. And she wants to talk about entity attachments, which scares the bejesus out of me. But anyway, Mary Beth, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Liz. And I'm really excited to talk about this. This is something that has, I don't know, come up for me so much. And I investigated and toyed with it a lot. So years ago, I never believed in anything like that. And maybe I didn't want to believe it. And I think that's just like you said, it scares a lot of people. The idea of it is scary to them. It's frightening, right? To think of an entity attachment, or another nicer way. There's one psychologist who calls it field intrusion, just to make it less scary. Okay. So I never believed in this. And then something really interesting happened. And this was before I did QHHT. I remember at the time I was studying access consciousness, and I became a BARS certified with them. And they had a really interesting program and modality, but mostly they asked questions. And the originator of that modality, Gary Douglas, he had like this radio program. And one day he was talking about how he had come across this antique chest or something, and it had an energy or an entity attached to it, and how he demanded that entity or energy to get out of it and to leave, and how he did it. And I thought this was really interesting because something was going on in my life. My son was maybe 18 or 19, and he was living at home, and he was dating this girl, and they were doing all kinds of drugs and alcohol. And I bring that up because now I don't know if it's really true, but some people say that puts holes in your field, and that will allow intrusions. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's also that some of those disembodied entities in their lifetimes, if they had a lifetime, dabbled in those things and are attracted by it and resonate with it. And so that's how they're able to pick up that host, right?
Now listen, sorry to cut in.
No, go ahead.
So that's exactly why I'm against ayahuasca and psychedelics and shrooms and all of that stuff, because unless it is an extremely controlled process, and lots of people say, oh yeah, this shaman, he or she's well known. The problem is it's the intention behind the experience. You don't know what their intentions actually are. And I've now come across several people that have had bad intended shamans that are controlling these psychedelic experiences. And what I find is, especially with those types of drugs that really let go of the consciousness, you're not very well protected when it comes to attracting an entity attachment. I have found that as well.
Right. And I think you're absolutely right about all those things. In fact, that's why I never encourage, I think people should do whatever they feel to do, and whatever their path is their path. But I've always felt like I feel like journeying through QHHT and BQH, I can get the same places that you would with ayahuasca, I believe. So why would I use that crutch? Like, you have that ability and capability within yourself. You don't need to do that.
And that's exactly how I feel with not only the QHHT, BQH, but also with the CTT and
Yeah, exactly.
hypnotherapy. You don't need to be under a substance that makes you let go of control.
Hmm.
In fact, you can actually have a more pinpointed approach from giving you, Mary Beth, the QHHT or BQH questions. And then when you're going into the session, same as me, we go into the session and we actually target those questions, as opposed to somebody drinking ayahuasca tea or shrooms or psychedelics. And then there's no boundaries, there's no control. And a
Right,
lot of times people do have dark experiences under those types of things.
right,
Why
right.
do you think when people smoke marijuana, they start to feel extremely paranoid? Well,
Mhm.
I think that it's because the marijuana at that point is very, very strong, and it could possibly, please note that I am using the word possibly for the
Yeah,
audience out there, but it could possibly be attracting at that point some dark entities or something dark. And I think subconsciously you may understand that, and you start to become paranoid in your thinking.
right.
So yeah, sorry, go on. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's it's really important that we talk about all these things. I mean, I always thought and wondered, well, why did they call alcohol and wine and things? Why did they call it spirits? Why did they call it that?
Mm.
I mean, really? Okay, so what are they trying to say when they call it spirits? Well, I think that, yeah, I think that somehow some disembodied spirits are able to access your field through that. You know, somehow it breaks down or it will, I don't know what it does, but it and yes, and to your point, everything that we're going to talk about tonight is all really supposition and opinion because and maybe from experience, but because we really don't, there's so little known about this. People don't like to talk about it.
Mm.
Um, you know, there's a few great books on it, but there's not a whole lot. Dolores Cannon didn't believe in it. She said that it's there that it wasn't, it didn't ever exist, and she didn't find any of it in her sessions. And many facilitators that I know don't find it, and many find it. Some people find them in sessions and some people don't. And I don't know why that is. And when you come to like a QHHT session and you get to the higher self, and maybe you've ran across something that you think is like some sort of an entity attachment, and you've maybe even released it, and you ask the higher self if they sensed it or felt it, it doesn't seem to be, I don't know. We've never had a conversation that's really explained this with a higher self. That I've come across, and you know, and of course I'm on the forums, and we talk about these things amongst each other all the time. So there's not a lot of clarity about it. Okay, but
Well, what I
yeah,
will say is that I had worked on somebody, in fact, George and I had worked on someone who did have a black magic entity attachment, and we did many, many, many CTT sessions. This entity attachment was so strong that we could not get rid of it. But it was the only thing that started to really push it away from the person who is suffering from the attachment. Now, as we were doing the CTT session, this black magic attachment was like shouting at me, threatening at me, getting in my face, screaming, saying this coming for me, it's going to kill me, it's going to this, it's going to that. And I just had to work through that and keep trying to push it away. Now, with this particular type of entity attachment, and everybody has a different approach, one of the BQH practitioners actually worked with this person and gave the entity attachment room to talk and
yes,
send it love and all this. Well,
yeah,
unfortunately for this particular type of attachment, that made it actually a lot stronger. And so, but this thing is really stubborn. And I can tell you, this thing has probably been worked on in just about every country out there, because this person who's suffering The entity attachment cannot get rid of it at all. So it was a very different type of attachment, but I know that the BQH, I think the BQH QHHT protocol is to talk to it, find out what it wants.
Yeah,
Now,
the BQH and the interpersonal hypnosis. Yeah, we talk to it. Yeah.
you talk to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked to lots. And so not only that, so let me go back. So this access consciousness, Gary Douglas is explaining how he finds this energy. Well, what was happening with me was my very outgoing, cheerful son, even when he was doing drugs and everything, was very cheery, very outgoing, communicates really well, son started dating this girl. And just to give you an idea, my daughters used to call her crazy pants because she would just become crazy at times and go off on him and like hitting and spitting and like just crazy. And some of the words she used, I only really witnessed it maybe at once or twice. I heard her like saying things that were horrible, right? And anyway, she breaks up with him and he becomes very depressed. And he becomes like, I noticed the personality. I remember saying to my daughter, I said, it's so weird. It's like something was in her and it just jumped to him because he's saying and talking exactly like she used to talk, like the same, like I could feel it was the same, right? Well, my son got really, really bad. And it was a very, very dark and hard time for us, Liz. He became very suicidal, and so much so that my husband and I used to have to put him in our bed with him between us so that we would be sure that he wouldn't hurt himself. There had to be someone with him all the time. I got him to go to counseling, and he was over 18, so I couldn't really do anything, but only if he was willing. So he was going to counseling. And I finally, one time, I'd really given up hope. I was taking him to the therapist, and I called the therapist ahead of time. And I told him, I said, listen, I told him what we were going through at home, how we couldn't even leave him alone because he would hurt himself. And so that day when I went and took him to the therapist, he had him, committed for 72 hours. And so in the state of California, if the therapist says, that you're a threat to yourself, they can commit you to a facility for 72 hours. And he was so angry with me, right? Anyways, it was awful. It was horrible. And he goes and he's in there, and I'm just relieved that I can sleep, maybe, but I can sleep anyway, because how can you sleep when your kid's going through this, right? And that night, I was a Reiki practitioner, and I remembered what Gary Douglas had said. I remembered the words he said to use. And so I spent the whole night just practicing distance Reiki and saying these words that I did not allow this entity to be within my son, and all these things. And I kept going and going all night long. And the next morning, I had to go to my mom's. My daughters were with me, and we drove to my mom's. And 1 o'clock, not even 1 o'clock, I get this phone call from my son. He's all happy. And he says, Mom, you have to come pick me up. And I'm like, I turn to my daughter. I'm like, what the hell? He's supposed to be, they have to keep him for 72 hours. It's not 72 hours. He was just put in there. And anyway, we go, my older daughter and I go, and we go to pick him up, and he's so different. And we're waiting. We're thinking he's like fooled everybody. He's tricking everybody. He's just acting this way, right? It never came back, Liz. It never came back.
Wow.
It was so weird. So that was my first experience of an entity attachment. And then I started practicing QHHT. Okay, so, in QHHT and BQH, it's true. Sometimes I found them and I spoke to them. And a lot of times, if you do like a surrogate, especially, I remember one young man, his mom had been institutionalized for quite some time, and he really wanted to try to help her. And we found that she had an entity attachment, and we did a release with her. But the problem is when the person, like his mom in that case, she had completely given up, like she didn't want to live any life more, and she invited that entity. She didn't want to be there. And so even though that entity was willing to go when we spoke with it, it never did go because she wasn't ready to let it go.
Mm. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
because they serve a purpose. And
they
I,
do serve a purpose.
with entity attachments, that one that I worked on, this is not the first lifetime that the entity and this person had had together. They had had multiple tit for tat lifetimes. Victim, perpetrator, victim, perpetrator, victim. And the thing is, even in this lifetime, they still were learning due to the entity attachment. Now, I would never advocate for trance mediumship, and there's a reason behind that, because you're basically asking for the spirit to step into your body and communicate through you. Well, that's how this entity attachment grabs hold of the person I'm talking about. They were doing automated writing. They were at an automated writing workshop. And they just, dove straight in and without protections in place, and that was it. The host, the black magic host entity, jumped into him. The black magic host entity jumped into the person. It's a very masculine energy, by the way, that black magic entity attachment jumped into the person, and basically just it's been there ever since. Now you're talking 15 plus years now that this person suffers on a daily basis with this attachment.
Right. And sometimes it's like, I think it's very rare that it's one as nasty as that. Okay. And I even believe that sometimes they're very good ones. Do you ever remember hearing, I heard this case a few years ago about some man, he dove into a pool or something and he hit his head. And after that, he became a savant at like art and piano and things like this. He never knew how to play the piano at all, but after he hit his head, he did. I have a feeling that he has an entity attachment that just happens to be kind of nice, as we might look at it.
Woo!
I just really, because that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of way an entity can come into the body, and that's the kind of big change that can happen, like a really extreme change can happen. Like it was so strange with my son, right? So there's this. Now, a lot of them they have contracts with the people that I've had, maybe BQH sessions with. And, I know sometimes they try to kind of hide and they don't try to come out. And so since then, I got kind of tired of dealing with them, to tell you the truth, because I'm doing a BQH. I'm not there for them. I'm there to help the person connect with their higher self and to be able to grow in their awakening and their ascension. So I don't feel like sometimes that I'm there for the entity, right? But I think maybe sometimes I've been directly directed by that entity's higher self just to be there, because I've just put it to them like this. I've just said, okay, listen, I'm going to be here for a few hours. You have a few minutes. If you want us to help you, then you're going to have to be willing to go. If you're not willing to go, then don't bother me. Don't waste my time. I'm not, and I just put it to them like that. And when I put it to them like that, they become a little more desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't play with you so much because they do try to be scary and stuff like
Yeah.
this. But the point is, Liz, if they're so scary and powerful, why do they want to have a host?
Yep.
That's what I always point out to people. Don't be afraid of them. They're not scary. Just because they're dead doesn't mean they're smarter than you.
Right. And also, they do, well, yeah, you're right. They do try to become very scary.
Well,
and they always have a message. It's like, if you're so powerful, then why do you need to be attached to somebody? Why can you not exist on your own?
exactly.
Is what I think. Why do you have to have a host?
Exactly.
So actually, you're not that powerful at all. You can't even exist as a separate consciousness
On your own. That's right. But they can. And so that's what I do. So when I do sessions, one of the things that I like to do for myself is whenever I'm having a session, I open up sacred space. Okay. And I do that in a shamanistic ceremony that's pretty brief. But also, I started doing, because of these entity attachments, I started calling in Archangel Michael and this team of angels, and I always invite them to create a portal of light and love for the transcendence of any and all energies and entities that want to make use of this space at this time. And I just ask for those ascended angels to come and help with this. And that's all I do. So if I find a being and they're ready to go, and I just ask them, and sometimes they'll say, well, no, you kind of have to start out with a dialogue. So first of all, there's the finding it. So a lot of times how we find it is when we're doing a session and we ask for a body scan, the higher self will say, well, there's something here in the left side. And I go, okay, well, can I help you with that? Sure, you can help. Okay, I'd like to talk to it. So I like to bring it up to the voice box. And as I bring it up to the voice box, I'd like to talk with that pain in the left side or whatever it happens to be. You use whatever the words are. And then that's how you find it. Well, how long have you been here? Oh, a really long time. How did you get here? You start asking all these questions, and all these things are covered in, there's a lot of books. I'm trying to think, I think William Baldwin wrote a huge book about this. And so there's, different ideas of how to do this. Okay. So you can do it in this way. And then, I just ask them, I say, okay, well, you're not really part of it has to do with, I'll go back to that woman. I asked the entity, well, what do you do here? And why are you here? And she said, well, she invited me here because I'm here to make her happy. And I go, oh, so is she happy now? And she waited and she goes, oh, no. And I go, so you're not really doing anything, are you? So I go, well, would you like to move on then and go on and, use this space and move on to another place? We can help you to release you from this contract, from this body, and you can move on if you want to. Are you willing to do that? Yes, I'm willing to do that. Well, before you do that, can you look all around you in this body and tell me if there's anything else like you here? And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. And then I just ask them to look up and see the portal of light and love. And sometimes they see relatives or people, guides they know, who have been waiting for them to kind of wake up from this, whatever it is, or they'll see the archangels and they'll go. And that's all. And the person feels lighter. They feel a shift. They feel different. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody had an entity attachment for 15 years that had a certain nasty personality trait, that suddenly overnight that person's going to be able to totally shift that. Because all this time they thought it was them. They didn't ever realize that it was not even them. So they might have taken on some of those characteristics. So they may have to do some work for themselves.
Yeah,
That's just my point of view.
they've tried everything. They've gone to Portuguese shamans, South American shamans, BQH, QHHT, CTT. I mean, you name it, they've tried it. And exorcisms, all kinds of stuff, and it just won't go. But this runs deeper than just this lifetime.
Oh,
This was
yeah.
something that has been hanging around. And like I said, it's almost like a karmic payback, because in previous lifetimes, they were nasty to the entity. They tortured the entity. The entity was actually a soul and a body. Now, when you find these entities, or do you find that they're separate souls?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess if you come right down to it, we're all one. So I don't know where the separation lines are and aren't. And that's why I say, like, it's so weird how I don't feel like the higher self actually identifies that there's something like foreign, that it's like they don't call it that. So I don't know. I really don't know where or how to draw the line. I had one case, it was actually really interesting, where this woman had an attachment of an entity that was, or a personality from one of her past lives.
Oh, I was going to ask you if this is schizophrenia related.
Oh, for sure. For sure, it's related to schizophrenia. I really feel sometimes a schizophrenic is somebody that just has a whole lot of fragmented personalities, right? Just a whole lot of different. Yeah, I think it is. So that's happened. So now, and then I'll tell you about it. I also do, besides BQH, CTT, QHHT, all these things, emotion code. Sometimes I just do counseling. So I have this young kid, and he is kind of into demons and things like this. And he was telling me about this one that had been with him for a long time. And I said, okay, well, I talked to him a bit about it, and about how, well, that's all very nice that you think he's here protecting you and being your friend and your companion in this life, but you do realize that when you make an agreement with a being of any type, whether it's an ascended master or anything, that there's some fine writing that you should be aware of. There's some details that they may not be completely upfront with you about.
Oh, yeah.
And that they're using you. They're not just helping you. They're also using you. They're not just in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a two-way street, okay? And he wasn't really aware of that. And so I said, okay, well, can I speak to the being through you? And he said, yes. And I spoke to this being. And this being was so sure that he was helping and protecting this young man. And the problem is, when he was a little kid, maybe he was, but now he's a man. And I said, you're not allowing him to come into his own full power. And why are you here? Why don't you have your own life? Just like you said, Liz, like, if you're so powerful, why do you need a host? And he admitted to me that he had only been on the earth plane as an animal before, and he really didn't want to become as a human by himself, but he wanted to have some of the experience through this young man. And I said, well, I said, you're a chicken shit. I said, if you want to have this lifetime and you want to take some of this experience, you need to have it all. You need to take the good and the bad and do the whole thing. It's really unfair to come under these false pretenses, pretending you're protecting someone when all you're really doing is stealing his power. And he went away.
And that I totally understand that. I do.
They
I
do
yes.
always think they're helping. They always
Yeah.
do. You just have to show them that they're not.
Oh, so do you think that's the key to getting rid of them?
Well, it's not even getting rid of them. I mean, I would tell you that a lot of times I have a lot of compassion and love towards them. A lot of them are so lost. They're so lost. And they may have been lost for lifetimes like this. They didn't go the easy, graceful way into the light and keep expanding in the natural order of things. They kind of like they got scared, or they held back somewhere along the way. You know, a lot of times it's somebody who's passed away and they just didn't leave the earthly realm, like they stay here. But when they stay here like that, I don't think that they have permission to do that, and they can't just connect to source energy. So they have to get energy from someone else, someone who's living. That's why they have to have a host. So they'll find somebody that it resonates with them, and they just rationalize this whole thing. So they see this little girl who's hurt and upset and traumatized, something terrible's happened to her, and they can relate because that happened to them. And so they go and they're able to go into her, and then they think they use this, they're using this body for energy, and their whole excuse is that they're helping protect her. They're helping her. But I'm sorry, if you have parasites, that's stealing some of your energy that you need for your own wholeness. So I don't think that it's actually helping them.
No. Oh, no, it's not. I mean,
Right?
it's like anything. Any sort of protective mechanism
Is in
that
the
we put in
end,
place for
yeah.
survival as a child, like certain brain wiring traits, certain, coping mechanisms, they were necessary when you're a child, but then as an adult, when we're trying to move on, our consciousness has more freedom, we're not living under those circumstances anymore, but that wiring is still there. And that's
Mhm.
what holds us back by way
That's
of,
what, yeah, it hampers your growth.
yeah.
Exactly. So I was really intrigued by all this because, I couldn't understand, like, I kept finding these beings, sometimes they have had lifetimes before, sometimes they haven't. They're all different, okay? Sometimes they're just energies. It's all different things. There's all different categories of these. But so one night, or not night, in the daytime, I was reading, I think, William Baldwin's book on spirit attachments, and I was really, really trying to like process and figure all this stuff out, and I fell asleep. And I had the most interesting dream.
Oh God, you scare me, Mary Beth. What was it?
I was in a past life. I was a young woman, red hair, long, a college student, maybe in like if it looks like the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. And it's like my first day in this one class, and there's this one guy, and he's like really cute. I think he's so cute, and he's like really like hovering over me, and like he wants to take me out or something. And I don't know what happens, but I died. I don't know if he killed me. I really don't know. But I didn't know I was dead. All I knew was I was suddenly in, and back then they didn't even have these, so it was weird. It was so confusing. I was suddenly like in a mall, like a mall, like a big shopping mall, and all the stores are like closed. And I'm looking for light, because you know how when you're an enclosed shopping mall, if you could just find the light of the front doors, you could find the way out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for the light and I can't find it. And finally, I see like a few people in like a food court, and there's a woman, she's washing up, and one guy, he's sitting there and he's eating like a sack lunch or something. And I go up to them and I said, "Can you help me?" And they said no, and they went away. Like they just said no and like went away. And I remember having like these books, and I remember the people were like Asian too. I remember the woman who was cleaning and the guy, they were Asian. And then I remember I'm carrying like not books, but like a clipboard, and I have like a cell phone. And here it is, so 60s, 70s, whatever year. And I'm trying to use this cell phone to call someone to help me. But then I realized it's a calculator.
Oh my God.
And I'm so confused. I'm just so confused. And suddenly I'm in a like a not a hospital, like a clinic. And there's a young girl and a young guy, and they said, "Oh, we have somebody who we think can help you." And I was so relieved and so happy. And this woman comes in, and I swear to you, it must be this, oh gosh, I wish I could. There's this Italian hypnotist who used to deal with entity attachments, and she wrote a big book. I swear it was her. Anyway, she says to me, it's this woman, and she has a white coat on, and she says, I'm trying to say, she goes, "Do you know who you are?" And I'm thinking I'm this woman. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm this girl, and I'm a college student, and she turns and she gives me a mirror, and I'm an Asian man, in my like middle-aged Asian man. That's what I see when I look into the mirror. And then I woke up and I realized I was an entity attachment. I had died, and I came into this man's body somehow, and I was just lost in there, and I was stuck in there, and I didn't know how to get out. And it made me have so much more compassion for entity attachments, because I realized that it's so confusing.
Wow. You know, things and experiences come to you for a reason. And
Yeah.
I feel like it gives you that greater understanding of the work you're doing, especially in the fields that we're in. And that's probably to help you with your understanding. Like they're confused, they're lost, they don't understand what's happened to them. As you were talking, I don't feel like they're soul attachments, like as a complete soul. What I was getting, what information I was channeling, is that they're fragmented souls.
Little pieces, fragments of the
Yeah.
personality of the soul. Yeah, it's so amazing. So the reason why you and I are speaking about this right now is because I did an emotion code client a couple of weeks ago. So when I sit down, it's funny, somebody asked me one day when I was doing, what do you call this exactly? Because it's true, I don't just do emotion code. I sit there, I ask the person to speak with their higher self and connect with their higher self. I use muscle testing and the emotion code to help clear emotions, but it's more than that. I always know that their higher self, spirit has brought them there for a reason.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so I'm listening to this woman, and I'm listening to her, and she's talking and talking and talking, and I'm not getting it. I'm like, I don't understand why I'm here. I'm just like telling my guides, I don't get it. I don't know why I'm here. I'm listening to her. I can hear that she has problems, but she's not getting to the point. What is it? So I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, she tells me, well, all this is important for me, but the most important thing is right now. And I knew it. I could feel we were getting to the heart of things. She said, I'm just so upset about my son. And she started to tell me some things about her son and all the terrible, just he was in deep depression, and he had all these terrible issues, and, and she didn't know what to do. And I just knew right away, I go, oh my gosh, it's an entity attachment. I can feel it.
Hmm.
It just reminded me the whole story of my son. And I told her the story of my son. And I said, I never tried to just remove an entity attachment with the emotion code. Maybe we could do that. And so I said, let's muscle test on it. And I got a yes. And I go, oh, okay, great. So how do I do that? And, I always ask for an ascended master to help us with the emotion code when I'm doing that. And Jesus came and helped. And it was great. And we just, we did some work, some surrogate work, because her being his mom, you're able to make that connection. You're not crossing a line, right? And we removed it. And he was better. The very next day,
Really?
she noticed it.
Wow.
So there you go. The emotion code can be used, the CTT can be used, anything can be used any way you want to. Just be creative and always ask for help.
Oh, yeah. You have to ask for help. I mean, yeah, that's amazing. That's really awesome. Well, I know that when I've been in turmoil, your emotion code has helped me and figure out things that were going on in my life. Everybody thinks that, oh, because you're psychic, you must know everything. Yeah, right. I don't know anything about my own life.
Right? It's so easy for us to know about other people. It's easy for me to do the emotion code for other people. I would tell you, even I told you like maybe the couple weeks ago, I was just a mess. Like there were so many things happening in my life. And I just had to remind myself, oh, okay, Mary Beth, maybe do some of the things you tell your clients to do now.
Yeah. But it's hard. It's hard to do it for yourself. It's really difficult because also you're emotionally removed when you're working with someone else. So you have a job to do and you go in and do it. And when you're working for yourself, you're like, oh, this is a total mess. I don't want to know this answer. I don't want to know that. And
I think
it's tend to screw it up.
I think it's more than that. One of the things that I like to teach people, and I was teaching someone the other day is, and even when I teach people how to do the emotion code, one of the most important things that you have to do, and so when you're in turmoil, it's hard to do this. You have to raise your frequency to be able to get really accurate answers in muscle testing and to be able to do it and to be able to shift things. So if you're like really down in some heavy, sticky emotions, you're not going to be able to raise your frequency high enough to be able to get accurate muscle testing. So that may be part of it too. I don't think it's just for muscle testing. I find that anytime I've been doing Reiki, QHHT, emotion code, muscle testing, I noticed it a long time ago. I remember when I was first learning to do QHHT, and I would tell people, Dolores Cannon, she's doing something else. It's not just the script. It's not just what she's telling you guys. She's doing something else. I can feel it. She's raising her frequency. I can feel it. Her frequency, she raises it up and then she starts.
Oh, yeah. Well, so before I start a session, we always have a little chat first. And the reason being is I'm trying to match their energy because I need to, be able to go in. I need to access the information. So you have to match them on their energetic level. You've got to find a way in there. So even when you're having a conversation and you're saying, how are you? What's been happening? What would you like to talk about today? Just that little 2-minute scenario allows me to automatically sync to whatever it is I need to sync to so I can go in there and grab the information.
Right.
It's very important.
It is.
So how is your success rate for getting rid of these things?
It's pretty good. I mean, a lot of them, most of them go very easily. Even ones, I remember I had a client, she was probably one of my first QHHT clients. And our first session that we did together, it was okay. It was good, but it was a little shaky. And maybe about a year or 2 years later, which is not all that common, she called me back and she wanted to have another session. And by that time, I was doing the emotion code. And before the session, I told her, I said, hey, you know what? Before we do this session, let's do the emotion code to kind of help, because I could feel her kind of closed all the time or sort of blocked. Okay. That's what I feel when people have entity attachments. That's not always what causes a blockage, but sometimes that I can feel that, and I feel that it might be that. Okay. So I told her, I said, oh, hey, let's do the emotion code first. And she's all sure. So we do the emotion code just to clear. And so my reference was to clear any emotions that might be blocking her to having a clear session with her higher self. Okay. So we did that. And then we did the session. We get this big, long session, goes on past life and gets to the higher self. We ask all these questions and all this stuff, right? And the time is running out and it's time to go. And so I'm about to wind things down and I'm about to say, okay, so now, we're going to, call the everyday consciousness back into awareness now. And I'm going into the part. And I hear in my, not audibly, physically, but you'll understand. I hear something screaming. I hear a woman screaming, wait. There was an attachment that had been with her for 12 years. She wanted to come up the first session, but didn't. She wanted to come up this session and have help to get out, but waited till the very last minute. I mean, really, the last second to make me aware of her. And then we released her. And she had been causing like this constriction in her voice and not allowing her to really speak her truth and be heard. And she thought she was protecting her because she'd been protecting her since she was a little girl, not to say things that would get her in trouble and things like that. Right? But she was still doing that. And I said, well, she's not a little girl anymore. She's grown up. It's time for you to move on. You can't do anything here, and you're not helping. You're not helping her, and you're not helping yourself. Would you like to move on and grow in your own way? Yes, I want to go. And she went.
Wow. That's amazing.
Right?
So if anybody wants to get a session with you, Mary Beth, emotion code or BQH, how do they contact you?
They contact me by emailing me at Qhhtandme. And so, I always do all of this personally. I like to be very personally involved with scheduling people. So yeah, just email me and figure out if you're going to do an emotion code or a BQH, or if you're in the area, you can do a QHHT, and I'm happy to help whoever feels guided to come, and I do all kinds of things, and mostly I just follow the guidance of their higher self. Whatever their higher self is telling me I'm there for, that's what I do.
Well, you certainly helped me when we did that session. You made me contact my higher self. It was amazing. I don't know if it was my higher self. I was talking to a tree.
I know. It was so interesting. I feel like there's there's more there for you still. But
Oh,
you
there's
know,
a lot more. That was a very shortened version just to show me
yeah,
what you did. But because I'd done the emotion code with you many times, but I'd never seen you do the BQH in action. And that was so awesome. And whenever I need to know something, I talk to that tree.
yeah, it's awesome that we have all these tools and things. And that's one of the things I think that comes up a lot in a lot of the sessions, is they always give me like, and sometimes I ask, well, is there a tool? Is there something she can know when you want to say yes or you want to say no? Or, or is there a time that she should talk to you? Or is there, and they give you all this guidance and help. And for people who are, just starting out on this, I think it's good. I think it's good.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for doing this video with us. Again, if you want to get in touch with Mary Beth, I've known Mary Beth for years. I love her. She's trustworthy. She's good at what she does. She's helped me with my problems. Don't think that just because I'm a psychic medium, I don't have problems. Of course I do. Qhhtandme@gmail.com.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.